Hello and welcome to Highland Country Fellowship. If we've not yet met, my name is Bill Rector and I'm delighted to be the teaching pastor here. Unfortunately, I'm not so delighted to be stuck at home today. I am quarantined as I have tested positive for the COVID-19 virus. I know that you will all be praying on my behalf, and I really do appreciate that. I will tell you that right now I've had very mild symptoms and consider myself blessed. So give praise with me to God that my case of this is right now nothing more than a mild cold, and I will be restored to you soon. So thank you for that. Also, thank you for understanding. I don't relish the idea of not being in front of you, but I am glad to be able to present to you as our commitment every week to go verse by verse through God's Word. And today, I want to take you to the 8th chapter of Isaiah, and we'll finish that chapter and go into some of the verses in the 9th. Let me read it to you, and then we'll take a look at it verse by verse. Isaiah 8, verse 19. When men tell you to consult mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? To the law and to the testimony. If they do not speak according to this word, they have no light of dawn. Distressed and hungry, they will roam through the land. When they are famished, they will become enraged, and looking outward, they will curse their king and their God. Then they will look toward the earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom, and they will be thrust into utter darkness. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future, he will honor Galilee of the Gentiles by the way of the sea along the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light, and those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as men rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning and will be fuel for the fire. For unto us a child is born, and to us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. And this, beloved, is the word of the Lord, and the mouth of the Lord has spoken it. And a title for today's message is Light Coming into a World of Darkness. This is what Isaiah was predicting 700 years or so before the birth of Jesus. And the situation for him was desperate. Isaiah was a prophet to the southern tribes of Judah, and the northern tribes had already been taken into captivity by Assyria. Isaiah was preaching that if the southern tribes wanted to avoid the same fate, they had to obey God. But the king of the southern tribes was not going to do that. His name was Ahaz. And what he was doing was actually worshiping other gods in the temple. He went to make a deal with Assyria and started liking the temples to their gods, brought back and actually constructed altars near the temple in Jerusalem. And it is even rumored that he conducted child sacrifices in those altars. So I want you to know that this was a very, very dark time. That's what Isaiah is talking about. The gloom and the darkness that Jesus comes into will replace that gloom and darkness. One of the things I guess I want to make sure that you understand is that as dark as it was then, it's similarly dark now. And the world is generally a dark place. We're fortunate to live in a century and to live in a country where we have mildly pleasant times compared to the history of the entire world and all the peoples that have ever lived in the world, we have relatively mild times. We are not always seeing the kind of darkness that Isaiah saw. And yet, we do see similar darknesses. Threats from foreign powers, child sacrifices. Need I simply say that since 1971, millions of children in America have been sacrificed? It is a dark time for us. It is a dark time because people, men, advisors, counselors, do not know where to go for the truth. This is what Isaiah says. He says, when men tell you to consult mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? Why would anyone else go to anywhere else but the word of the living God for their truth? And when people start going elsewhere, this is a problem. He says, to the law and to the testimony, if they do not speak according to this word, they have no light of dawn. A good test is if someone's ideas don't line up with the Bible, they have no light in them, and they will lead to further darkness. Distressed and hungry, they will roam through the land. When they are famished, they will become enraged, looking outward. They will curse their king and their God. Then they will look toward the earth and see only distress and darkness, fearful gloom, and they will be thrust into utter darkness. This is the despair that grips a modern generation, and we see it in our country. People having no light see nothing but darkness and are thrust into misery. Nevertheless, chapter 9 begins, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. God always enters into the world of darkness because compared to the light of God, everything on earth is darkness. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. This is a reference to the northern tribes that had already been carried into captivity. Remember, Isaiah was in Judah when he was saying he had humbled these lands to the north around the Sea of Galilee. In the future, the Messiah would dwell in them, as we saw the beginnings of Jesus' Jesus' ministry. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. That can be said of anyone whose heart has turned to Jesus and has realized the truth of God and the truth of what he has done by coming to earth and offering us peace at a time when we were at war with him. Of those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. Though we walk through a valley of the shadow of death, God offers his hand to us. You've enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as men rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, this was the time during Judges when Midian was oppressing the Jewish people and Gideon overthrew them, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle, every garment rolled in blood, will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. This is a prophecy that one day all of the tools of oppression, all of the swords will be beat into plowshares. For us, verse 6 begins, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders. The idea that a new birth would happen, a new person would be born into this area, and the government would be upon his shoulders. This would have been a common thought of those awaiting God's Messiah. But what happens next is very interesting. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. To call a baby Everlasting Father makes no sense unless that baby is eternally born, unless he is born himself of God, unless it is God coming to be with us, Emmanuel. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God. So this is a prophecy that suggests a Trinitarian view of God. Isaiah, 700 years before Jesus was born, suggested that the baby would be God himself. I really enjoy that prophecy. Of the increase of his government and peace, there will be no end. And as I bring this abbreviated version of our teaching to a close, let me tell you that the idea of finding peace with God is something that is knit into every one of our hearts. Each of us cannot find peace in anything. We find temporary comfort, maybe quiet, maybe things that make us feel good for a while. But we know there's something deeper. And the Bible refers to it as a shalom, a peace, an understanding that you have right standing with God, that you're no longer his enemy, that you're now following his ideas, submitting to his government. And this can only happen by the reconciliation of Jesus Christ. And it's in him that I hope this season that you find peace. God bless you.